Live, stand by. Just a second. Okay, we're live.
Good morning. It is Wednesday, May 25th, 2022, and this is the regular meeting of the Lincoln County Board of Commissioners. Commissioner Hunt and I are present in the board conference room at the courthouse in Newport, and Commissioner Jacobson is joining us by Zoom, a remote participation, and we've got some other folks who will be joining us over Zoom as well. First up, we've got adoption of the consent calendar, routine items or items that have been discussed at previous meetings. Is there anything on the consent calendar that staff or commissioners wish to either highlight or remove?
I'll move for adoption of the consent calendar as presented.
I will second the motion.
I have a motion from Commissioner Hunt, second by Commissioner Jacobson to adopt the consent calendar. All in favor, please say aye.
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 We move on to decision and action items. First up is the second reading of Ordinance 526, amending Ordinance 495, mass gatherings in Lincoln County. And I believe we've got legal counsel Jerry Urbich online to walk us through this.
Yes, for the record, I am Jerry Herbich. I'm an assistant county counsel with Lincoln County, and I work under County Counsel Kristen Ewell. You're right, Chair. This is the second reading of the ordinance regarding amendments to mass gathering. And initially, what I would ask is if I could read by title only and explain the changes from the last reading.
That's fine with me.
And with me.
It's fine with me as well. Thanks.
Thank you. This is entitled Amendments to Ordinance Number 495, codified in sections 4.505 to 4.610 as mass gatherings, small, outdoor, and extended, in the Lincoln County Code, and declaring an emergency. So the Board of Commissioners individual board members have told me that they would like to adopt this as an emergency. So one difference from the reading, and we did have a reading on May 11th. That was the first reading. And at that time, we did go over all the requested amendments in significant detail. So the board members have asked that this be adopted as an emergency. And I think the reason, and the board could elaborate, is that it is still possible that there could be a request for one of these gatherings during this year. And if so, these additional provisions couldn't kick in for 90 days. And at that time, probably most everything would be over. And so, and remember that some of the major changes within this ordinance is to establish more due process, so that, especially with small gatherings, that there would be 14 days published notice and so on. And so I think the board wants those additional protective measures to be in effect. So we removed the language saying this will be effective 90 days after passage. And what it says is this ordinance being necessary for the immediate preservation of public peace, health, and safety. An emergency is declared to exist, and this ordinance shall take effect upon its passage. So I said that I would point out the other change. It's very small. The section is 4.530. And if we go to 4.530, what you will see is I have added one sentence that applies to extended mass gatherings. And we haven't had an application for those before, but the language corresponds to the requirements in the Oregon revised statutes. This language states as follows. In addition, for an EMG permit, approval shall require that the organizers show that permits required by the applicable land use regulations have been granted, and that the proposed gathering is compatible with existing land uses, and that it will not materially alter the stability of the overall land use patterns in the area. And so for those of you who may recall, EMGs are the most involved of the three types of gatherings, and they are land use matters. So those are land use criteria that are included within our ordinance. And those are all the changes. As I explained, we've gone through the changes that are proposed in some detail on May 11th. And the differences are, much of it has to do with more due process. If the board has any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. Otherwise, to the board, I would say, see if there's any public comment. This is the second reading.
Okay, I'll open it up first for questions or comments from the board and then go to public comment. Commissioner Hunt, any questions?
No,
Comments?
I mean, this is action really that was taken some time ago. And I believe this is really the final process in making it a permanent part of the county record.
Commissioner Jacobson.
No questions or comments for me. I don't know if the other two did or not, but I did have a conversation with Jerry about setting this as an emergency so that potentially you could capture events with these new rules that were, going to be planned for the summer. If we didn't do this, it would have been 90 days. And, that's the weather window in Lincoln County for having outdoor events. So just thought that this was good to get in place, before the summer season and when we might have these types of events.
Thank you. Do we have anybody online or in the audience here who wishes to comment on this?
And please use the raise hand function that helps us identify you. Chair, I would add that there was no written comment in regard to this or any written comment this week at all. So
Thank you. So I believe at this point, I'd be ready to entertain a motion.
I'll move for approval of ordinance 526, amending ordinance 495, mass gatherings in Lincoln County Code.
I will second the motion.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye.
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 It's approved. Now we move. Oh, Jerry, I'm sorry.
No, I'm just sorry. Thank you, commissioners.
You're welcome. Now we move on to item 6B, Small Business Development Center funding request for $30,000 for the coming fiscal year. And do we have anybody presenting on that from staff?
Yes, Chair, this is Tim Johnson, County Administrator. As a matter of house cleaning, last week we heard from the Small Business Development Center on their annual report to the Board of Commissioners. Within the context of that, we got somewhat waylaid, very good discussion and question and answers, but the subsequent issue that they wanted to come in and talk to you about was their continued funding request for $30,000. Again, as staff recommended, it is in the budget that was adopted last night by the Budget Committee. And it will come forward to you in June for your consideration and subsequent direction. But we wanted to clear that up so that you were aware of the action that unfortunately did not take place. With that, I can take any questions.
Commissioner Hunt?
Well, I guess I'm confused. You indicated that this is a part of the county budget for fiscal year 22-23. As you indicated, that was approved last night. It will come before the Board of Commissioners for final adoption before July 1. Why are we taking this action, which is an exception to our normal process?
Commissioner, thank you. In that regard, it was simply because of a house cleaning issue that they had placed on record that they were going to ask for that request in the meeting last week. And we got sidetracked and never got to that. So simply a house cleaning order.
Commissioner Jacobson, any comments or questions?
No comments or questions from me. Thanks.
I'd be ready to entertain a motion at this point.
Well, I guess I'll ask a point of
Oh,
order.
okay.
Why do we need a motion if it's a part of the budget?
Just a point of clarification.
So this is Assistant Counselor Herbige. It seems that there's been a little bit of confusion here. The intent, it looks like, for 6B was to bring it to the board's attention. You know, in other words, it could have, maybe should have been under discussion information, if I have that understanding right, because really the final action will be when you adopt the budget.
And I'm perfectly comfortable with discussing it, acknowledging the request, acknowledging that it's a part of the budget, and assuming that the budget will be approved. Again, it was, or adopted, it was approved last night. The request is, we're aware of it. We've included it in the budget and it will be funded.
I see your point, Commissioner, that this does seem duplicative and really not necessary at this point since it's already included in the approved budget. Commissioner Jacobson, thoughts?
Well, now I'm confused as well. So, yeah, it sounds to me like if this was already put in our budget, then we don't need a separate order. And I don't want to get in the business of doing separate orders for every single thing in the budget when we already have a budget process.
Mhm.
And unless I'm missing something here.
That's exactly how I see it. I mean, we could go through and do duplicate orders for every funding request in the budget, but I don't think that would be very efficient or accomplish much.
Yeah, I'm certainly supportive of funding them. It's just a matter of, you know, why it's been pulled
Process.
and separated.
Mhm.
It's a process question.
So it sounds like we have a consensus to lay this on the table as not needed. Am I reading the board correctly?
Yeah, I think we've discussed it. And again, it's included in part of the budget. The budget was approved and I expect the funding would be part of the budget that the Board of Commissioners will adopt next month. So I believe that, in my opinion, addresses the question.
Thank you.
I think it does as well. But I would just like Council Herbige or our county manager to correct if we're not, correct us if we're not seeing this correctly.
That's fine, Commissioners. Thank you very much. We'll follow that direction.
Thanks.
Yeah, and I'm fine with it as well.
Good.
All right, we can move to item 6C, an order regarding Thompson Sanitary 2021 Annual Rate Review Report. We had a presentation from the Thompson's team last week, and Administrator Johnson, will you be kind of setting the stage for this discussion? Or Council Ewell?
It'll move to the County Council. Thank you.
Okay.
So Commissioners, before you, you have a proposed order on the rate schedule for the service. The request is 9.88. And remember, this is an increase for 2 years. It fits within the rate review schedule. I would recommend you take public comment. And then if you have any questions, the Thompsons are here to answer those.
Okay, let's see if there's any commissioner comments or questions first. Commissioner Jacobson?
Yeah, something you just said kind of confused me, Council Yule. And so when you said it was a rate increase for 2 years, I took that the total rate increase was 9.88%.
So the rate request is 9.88. And my comment was that they did not make this request. There was no increase last year.
Okay, thank you. I thought you were saying that that was 9.88 for 2, I mean, like 9.88 year 1 and year 2. So I just wanted to make sure I was understanding what you said. Thanks.
Sure.
Commissioner Hunt?
No, again, I think that if you look at the current inflation rate and the fact that no rate increase was implemented last year, I'm comfortable with the request.
I am as well. I'd be ready to entertain a motion then.
Do you want to take public?
I
input?
believe
I'm
it's
sorry.
public comment.
Yeah, thank you. Is there anybody in the audience who wishes to make public comment on this request? Anybody online, please use the raise hand function of Zoom.
No written input.
And there's been no written input on this. Not seeing or hearing anyone. Now we can move to a motion.
I'll move for approval of the order increasing the Thompson Sanitary annual rates as indicated in the report.
She's muted.
Muted, sorry. I will second the motion, but I do have a discussion point just to say.
Okay, motion and a second, further discussion.
Yeah, I understand why rates were not increased in the, past 2 years. I understand that. But I think, 9.88 is a pretty large jump. And I would just like to see that, if rates need to be increased, that's done on a smaller rate increase instead of a larger one at one time. I think that just helps people, with limited incomes and stuff adjust to that. So just wanted to say that on the record. Thanks.
I'd agree with that sentiment, and I'd say for the most part, the haulers have managed to gauge the economy, gauge cost increases in a way that they've been able to avoid these big jumps, in this case, a nearly double-digit percentage jump. But I'm sure they didn't anticipate, and really most people in business did not anticipate the huge cost of operations increase, fuel and other factors. So we have a motion, a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, it's approved. Now we move on to discussion and information items. And first up, Ordinance 527, a first reading of a proposed fireworks ordinance presented by County Council Kristen Ewell.
Thank you, Commissioners. Kristen Ewell, County Council. And just by way of history of this was something that was proposed last summer. If you remember, the Walport City Council did implement a ban on fireworks. No other jurisdictions in the county did at the time. You considered it based on information from the sheriff and other law enforcement. There were concerns with enforcement, obviously, and I think that's a concern that you'll hear from other jurisdictions that are implementing this currently. Lincoln City has recently directed staff to draft an ordinance. And earlier this year, the city of Newport adopted a similar ordinance that we're going to discuss today. So would you like a full reading of the ordinance?
By title only is fine with me.
I would request a full reading of the ordinance.
Okay.
I believe it's important for the public to understand what this ordinance does and does not do. And since this is the first time it's come before us, I would request a full reading.
Sure.
I actually agree with Commissioner Hunt. Thank you.
Yep. Ordinance 527 relating to fireworks in unincorporated Lincoln County and declaring an emergency. The Lincoln County Board of Commissioners ordains as follows. Section 1. Section 2 of this ordinance are added to and made part of the Lincoln County Code, Chapter 2, as indicated. Section 2, fireworks. 2.6000, purpose, Lincoln County Code 2.6000 through 2.6010 shall be known as the Lincoln County Fireworks Ordinance and is adopted pursuant to the authority provided the county in ORS Chapter 480 and ORS 203.035. The purpose of the Lincoln County Fireworks Ordinance is to establish a procedure for prohibiting the sale and or use of consumer fireworks to ensure the safety of the public from the danger of fire hazards. 2.6005, definitions. The words and phrases in LCC 2.6000 to 2.6010 shall have the meaning provided in ORS Chapter 480. 2.6010, fireworks prohibition. By resolution of the Board of Commissioners, the use of consumer fireworks as defined in ORS 480.111, which shall include using, discharging, or exploding consumer fireworks, may be prohibited within the unincorporated limits of Lincoln County for a specified duration based on certain weather or weather-related conditions. Subsection 2, by resolution of the Board of Commissioners, the sale of consumer fireworks as authorized by ORS 480.160 may be prohibited within the unincorporated limits of Lincoln County for a specified duration based on certain weather or weather-related conditions. Subsection 3, subsection 1 or 2 does not apply to a fireworks display that is issued a public display permit under ORS 480.130 to 480.150. 2.6015, penalties. Subsection 1, violation of any provision of LCC 2.6000 to 2.6010 is punishable pursuant to LCC Chapter 10. Section 3, this ordinance being necessary for the immediate preservation of the public peace, health, and safety, an emergency is declared to exist, and this ordinance shall take effect upon its passage.
Thank you, Council Ewell. I would like to start off with a question in case people are not totally clear on what this language means. This isn't implementing a ban on sales or use of fireworks in unincorporated Lincoln County, but essentially it's giving us permission to do that on a yearly basis if we think conditions justify it, correct?
Correct. So the language specifically used is for a specified duration based on certain weather or weather-related conditions. So when fire season starts, if you are notified by the fire board, however that notification happens, when conditions become such where you feel there could be a danger, this is something that you could implement by resolution.
Or if there's a red flag warning or a drought declaration or other circumstances that we as a board would evaluate and then make a decision.
That's correct.
Commissioner Jacobson, any questions or comment?
No questions. I'm glad to see that we are pursuing this. I know last year, we had drought conditions. We had our fire board reaching out to us, wanting to, or I guess it was after the fire season, it reached out to us, but there's a lot of citizens reaching out, wanting us to put some type of tool in place. And I feel like it was just so late. I think it was like the last week in June or the second to last week in June that we were talking about it. And I feel like we just didn't have kind of our ducks in a row. And I feel like this is a nice tool to have in place for drought conditions, for the fire board reaching out, for red flag warning, for any of those types of things that we're starting to see more of in our county.
Commissioner Hunt.
No, I think it's important to realize that this ordinance really does nothing as far as taking action regarding fireworks or related activities, but it certainly gives us a framework within which we can take action should we so desire.
All right, Casey, Mr. Miller, did we have any written comment on this topic?
We did not.
Is there anybody online who would like to speak about this topic? If so, please use the raise hand function on Zoom. And while we're waiting on that, is there anyone present in the audience who wishes to be heard on this?
I'd ask the sheriff to come forward. I do have a question.
Good morning, Commissioners. For the record, Curtis Landers, Lincoln County Sheriff.
Yeah, I'd be interested in if we do pass an ordinance that restricts the use of fireworks or related activities, what changes will you make within the sheriff's office as far as activities of the sheriff deputies to address that ordinance?
Great question. And, I've been struggling to find an answer for that. It's, as you know, your role as commissioners and legislators are to adopt rules and ordinances, and then it's our role to enforce those. But, even if we were full staffing on July 4th, which we don't anticipate being, it's still very difficult to be proactive in that enforcement, to go out and actively look for people doing this. It's obviously not hard to see just driving around, and in the mass quantity of calls that we would get, it would be hard to address each one of those calls and prioritize. And it just turns into a prioritization challenge for us, that we have to look at other calls that probably rise higher on the priority list before we can respond to that type of incident. But it doesn't mean that we can't take action if we're in a circumstances where somebody's just, absolutely not, being reckless or careless, or just that, and we are called there, disturbance, other things that we get there for, that we can't still issue a citation if we're on scene. But it just would be impossible to be proactive in that enforcement.
Do you have any idea how many citations for fireworks issues? There are rules on the books now that have been issued in the last few years.
Not very many.
Is it safe to say that when I drive on I-5 and the general flow of traffic is somewhere in the neighborhood of 15 miles an hour over the speed limit, that's because there's really a lack of enforcement, and we might see similar exceptions to our ordinance as far as fireworks?
Yeah, I think in your analogy, comparing it to speeding and kind of what I was trying to direct, but in those, if you're seeing somebody go 90 down the road, they're probably going to get stopped if a trooper sees it.
Yeah, I can testify to that.
But
It was 80, not 90. for
80,
the
80.
record.
Okay. So I was kind of going outside in those boundaries. But again, if you compare to what, trying to see what the circumstances would be, 90 miles an hour for someone with fireworks displaying, and then that, yes, we could cite that point. We would cite at that point.
For the record, I'd been going 70 and Interstate 84, exited to go to Walla Walla for my 50th college reunion. The speed limit dropped to 55, and I had failed to adjust my perception of speed. And a state police officer reminded me and gave me an appropriate notification.
I figured there must be a story behind that analogy.
Very good.
But
And-
yes, it'd just be
Yeah,
I'm not saying I'm against the ordinance. I'm just saying, as far as the enforcement, and Council, you even pointed that it's just difficult, but it will help with that awareness piece to the public, that there are conditions that exist, that fireworks are not safe. The struggle with that is that when people see that that's against the law, then we're going to get more calls, or dispatch center is going to get more calls too, saying, hey, that's against the law now, go, cite that person. And so it will tie down our dispatch center a little bit with the increased calls that will be coming in.
Yeah. Well, you went to where I was going to conclude. I mean, again, assuming we pass an ordinance, there's limited ability to enforce it. And so the public needs to be aware that, while we hope there'll be messaging and greater awareness of the risks, there's probably little that can be done to address those that are only a minor violation of that ordinance.
Yeah, and just as you also pointed out too, Commissioner, is that there's already state statute for certain types of fireworks. And I know we're not talking about this, but there's also certain types of fireworks that are illegal in this state. And we rarely cite for those, although that's occurring all the time still when over the 4th of July.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'd like to say that I think this is a worthwhile thing to do, even though we acknowledge that the ability to enforce it will be limited, but especially if we and the cities all end up acting in a united way, I think there is possibility for some good public education and outreach. And hopefully it'll have some deterrent effect on people if they hear that it's illegal, that they might think twice about acting or not acting. And we just didn't really have time to address these questions when we were approached last year in the latter part of June, but now we do, and I like the direction of this. Commissioner Jacobson, thoughts, questions?
Yeah, I certainly understand the enforcement issue, and I think last year that was one of the main reasons we didn't do it. And I guess what I hope is that, even though we would still need to put this in place and then call upon it when the weather conditions, were dangerous for fireworks, I hope that over years, the public, can adjust their expectations for what a safe 4th of July looks like. And so I know that the first couple of years, if we have to use this tool or deploy this tool, that might be challenging. But I hope with time, there's some change in thinking about that. And, I can certainly say that I think there's been some change in the north part of the county around fireworks having been through a fire. So and that's the type of change we don't want, right? We don't want to have to learn the hard way. And so I'm just hoping with time that, some of the public thinking and understanding about this shifts. And I recognize that the first, couple of times we have to deploy this, or if we have to deploy it, that's going to put a difficult place on our law enforcement. So I just wanted to acknowledge that. But my hope is with time and education that some of this isn't quite as hard anymore.
Mr. Miller, I'll ask at this point if there is anyone online who wishes to offer comment on this topic. If so, use the raise hand function. And I don't recall seeing any written comment on this issue. And you're agreeing with that? And nobody in the room. Thank you, Sheriff.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So, do we have a consensus to move this forward?
Yes. It's okay with me.
Yes, we have a consensus, I think, to move it forward. I think it's on discussion information. So I would like to move it on to a following week and take public comment.
Why don't we
Council, you'll
bring it back in 2 weeks for a second reading?
Okay. Now we move to item 7B, annual rate review report. It's that time of year, and now we're going to hear from the gentleman with Dahl Disposal Service. Come on forward, please.
Thank you. Chuck Werwick with Dolls.
Good morning, I'm Joe Cook with Dahl.
Okay.
And boy, it's been a while. I'd really like to see that we can have meetings again in person. It's been a long year last year. And to Katie's point on the rates where we didn't have any rate increase last year, I agree 100% with what she's saying, is that we should have small increments annually is better. But last year with the COVID, as a team, we sat down and just felt a little compassion for our customers, that it just wasn't appropriate to have an increase last year with the troubles that we were having in the economy and all around. But the good thing is while we were doing that, we were able to go out and take some funds that we had saved away for sports activities and stuff for the schools that weren't happening last year because of the COVID. So we went out and got on a pretty good basis with the Fran's Bakery. We go in and get a pickup load of bread and go to food banks. We're taking food to Wellport, Yachats, Select, and of course Toledo. And then with that, we also, for the restaurants, every Thursday, we would get a takeout lunch for the entire crew. Then we'd go out to our drivers and bring them hamburgers or whatever we got. So we tried to keep things going in the economy best we could with what we had. And it was a decision that we made to just kind of suck in our horns and see where everything landed. Everything was in such flux. And during that time last year, we also were able to partner up with GP with their new Juno project. And that was quite an accomplishment. And has everybody aware of what's going on with Juno? Have you guys?
I think we have a basic familiarity with it.
Yeah, well, some of the numbers are tough to come up with, but I got the metal number that we've have taken that would have gone to the landfill, went through Juno and then was recycled. This is 958,207 pounds of metal that would have gone to the landfill had it not been for the Juno project. And we're looking for more numbers to be coming soon, but it is an R&D project still. I don't know when they're going to call it the real deal, but we've had a lot of people from Germany, France. We've had a lot of countries coming here to look at this. We're the first fully operational Juno facility that they've made. So it's kind of put Lincoln County on the map, which was pretty exciting and sad times that we had. Other than the construction and in the middle of winter, when you see that tin up on the hill, that took a long time. So with that, I would turn it over for questions for Joe, if you had any accounting questions or things of that nature.
All right, Commissioner Jacobson, questions for the Dahl team?
No questions. I really wasn't picking on you guys for not doing rate increase. In years previous, I completely, understand why you didn't do that. And I think it was the right thing to do at the time. So didn't want you to feel like I was picking on you there. I totally understand why you did what you did.
No, I don't take it that you were picking on us, Katie, because in my past, I have done that. I've gone 3 years going, well, we'll make it another year. We'll make it another year. Then you go in for a big one and everybody loses their mind, So no,
Well,
I agree. We try and come in and just keep us trued up in little increments. So.
And it's been difficult to have a crystal ball, and these last few years and know what's going to happen. So anyways, just wanted to say that. Thanks.
Or even like today, I was going through Philomath and they don't have a 6 to put for the cost of diesel. So they have an upside down 9.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, we're in some pretty shaky times right now, but. Yep.
Okay, Commissioner Hunt.
No, I think as their document indicates, they're requesting a proposed rate increase that is within the parameters of our program.
Okay, have we got anybody online who wishes? Oh, go ahead, please.
I don't know if this has been discussed, but the 2-year change in the CPIU West BC was 12.92%. So 85% of that's like 10.98, and then we were limited to the 6. I also would like to point out that the CPI in the ordinance, or the cost of living adjustment, is an every other year phenomena in the agreement. So we've talked about maybe trying to talk about doing that annually rather than every other year to keep the rates, the rate adjustment smaller, limit it to 3% instead of 6%. But anyway, those are just my only comments. I think we should be good with this number based on our projections.
Thank you. Anybody online? We can use the raise hand function of Zoom. I don't remember seeing anything in the way of written contact. So if we want to move this forward, next step.
You could bring it back for next week for a decision action.
I'm agreeable to that. Commissioner Hunt?
Yeah, I'm agreeable too, but I'd also like to make an observation based on Mr. Cook's comments. Last night, as you've already heard, the Budget Committee approved the county budget. But the county is faced with some of the same challenges that Dawes is faced with relative to inflation and increased costs, and really goes back to ballot measure 5 and 47, which have limited property tax increases, which limit the revenue to the county. And yet we also are facing cost increases that are driven much more critically by the higher rates of inflation. So I share your pain.
Thank you.
Commissioner Jacobson, are you good with bringing this back next week as a decision action item?
I agree with bringing it back next week. Thanks.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Now we
And
move,
that date
pardon me?
will be,
what,
2 weeks.
Is it? No.
next week?
June
Oh, next
1st.
week.
Is it June 1st?
Yeah, that would be the June 1st meeting,
Okay.
7 days from today.
So
June
June 1st, we're supposed to give 30 days notice.
Yeah.
Our billing will be going out probably the 3rd. And I would just like to have your approval to give that notification as of then, be 29 days or whatever it is.
so it'll be July 1st implementation of the new rate.
Okay,
Right,
yeah.
right.
Oh,
So normally we would send something out with a 30 days notice, but we'll send it out on the invoices. That'll go out on the 2nd or 3rd.
Okay,
I'd look to county council. Are there any issues with that?
I mean, next week, we'll bring it back for decision action on June 1st. So you'll have, their order at that time.
Okay.
All right, thank you very much.
thanks. Now we move on to reports, and first up, a COVID update, and we're going to hear from Public Health Director Florence Portal. And Casey will be bringing up the informational file. Good morning, Florence. Good to
Good
see you.
morning. You too. Good morning, commissioners. It's been a while now that I don't see you on a weekly basis anymore.
Mhm.
Okay, the update for, I guess, this month's, Casey, you can move to the next slide, please. Okay, so prior to going to the slide deck and all the graphs and data points, the main updates I have for you today are one, cases have definitely been increasing in our county and in Oregon and nationally. The Oregon Health and Science University had contributed a lot to defining kind of pictures over this pandemic, and their latest modeling shows that this current surge in cases is going to peak likely mid-June, as well as hospitalizations. As you will see in the graphs, even though we're seeing an increase, we're not seeing as dramatic an increase as we've seen with Omicron back in January. Obviously, the sister variants of Omicron, so Omicron was BA1, and then first sister BA2, and then 4 and 5. So all of those variants have been detected in Oregon. As we know, Omicron has shown a great ability to transmit even more rapidly and more easily than its cousins, I guess. So with those kind of newer variants, we are not necessarily seeing a change in transmission, meaning that the transmission is happening really fast. And the disease is not as severe as we've seen with previous variant, especially in people who have been immunized. The One good news is that last week, not only the advisory committee on immunization practice and the Western States work group approved a booster dose for children 5 to 11 years of age. And kiddos can go get vaccinated 5 months after having received the second dose of their primary series. And then the not so good news for those who are waiting for this is that we don't have a clear timeline yet on when the vaccine for children 6 months to 5 years is going to be rolled out. Next slide, please, Casey. Okay, so I just wanted to remind people maybe and have a little conversation about why it is a good idea to get boosted. So, you know, when you get your primary series, which is like the initial 2 vaccines for COVID, you're getting this initial protection and immunity that your body is building, but over time that immunity can wane. And so it is important to get a booster so that you can replenish, I guess, the immunity stocks and restore protection. And especially, you know, with those variants, this virus being so great at adapting to everything that we are throwing at it, and especially vaccines, and being able to still infect people who've been vaccinated, you know, making sure that your immunity get boosted on a regular basis would help, even if you get infected with COVID, for you to have a milder iteration of this disease. And so this is why we recommend people getting, you know, boosted on whenever the boosters are available to them or to their age category. And also because, you know, we've let go of a lot of protective measures, like we're not wearing masks in schools, at work. I mean, unless we want to do it, but it's not a requirement anymore. Next slide, please, Casey. Okay, so here are the graphs. So as you can see, it's pretty straightforward. We're going up. But like I said, not as drastically as we did in January, but this past week, we went over 2,000 cases a day for Oregon. Next slide. Okay, so in Lincoln County, similar trend up. Obviously, our numbers are not as high as they've been, but still, it's more than double the cases we had in April for May, and we're still in May, and it's more than 3 times the cases we had in March. Obviously, it's also 3 times less than the cases we had in February. You know, as you know, we're in contact with the hospital, and they haven't seen a lot of hospitalization, as will be demonstrated in the next few slides. And because, you know, our cases are raising, obviously our positivity rate is raising as well. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is the weekly view. So similar trend. It's interesting to see, like in March, on the week of March 20th, we almost had no case, and we're now back at 123 cases last week. Next slide, please. I also want to say that our requirements when it comes to those cases, so obviously any positive results for COVID is reported to us at the health department, but we do not have any more requirement to conduct investigations and or contact tracing unless we're faced with an outbreak in one facility. So there is less activity, for staff, and our team is not as not as large as it's been in the past. So this is the comparison over the years. It's just so interesting, when you hear COVID is over and let's go back to normal, and then you look at the years, and our 2022 yellow columns are still, aside from the April numbers, are still way higher than what we had seen in previous years. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is the statewide hospitalization data. As you can see, we were seeing, we saw a very dramatic dip, like we had seen a dramatic increase in January. So dramatic dip in March, April, with very low numbers of hospitalized people with COVID in April, and now we're seeing an increase. And as you know, we might see a little bit of a mortality increase as well. Usually they lag a little bit behind cases and hospitalization data. Next slide, please. So in Lincoln County, our hospital, like I said, really are holding their own, doing really good. At North Lincoln, we had only COVID cases reported on at the very beginning of the month, and now they're operating with no COVID cases. And then next slide, please. And the Newport Hospital is has seen a little bit more patients, but do not have any currently. So this is good news. Next slide, please. Okay, vaccinations, we're still going strong. We have a very, very high percentage of residents vaccinated in the community. And as you can see, we've seen some uptick in booster doses in the population that would benefit the most from being boosted. So that this is great. Next slide, please, Casey. Okay, so I changed a little bit the graph just to show you kind of an overview of the trend in terms of total vaccine administered in our community. I don't know if you remember, the previous graph was trying to compare how much boosters versus the total vaccine administered, but that has become really difficult to track because the data set we're receiving from the state didn't make sense to us. So I just went with total vaccine administered, and you can see that when the second booster got available for people 50 and over early April, we started to see a little bit of a rise in the vaccinations we were providing, and still we're at about 750 vaccines a week across Lincoln County, which is good. And like I was trying to say earlier, there is never a bad time for people to make a decision to get vaccinated, be it for their initial series, and they are welcome to come see us. They can make an appointment, but they don't have to make an appointment. We take walk-ins, and same thing for if somebody needs their booster or the second boosters, they're welcome anytime. Next slide, please, Casey. Okay, so this is the upcoming vaccination clinics. We're continuing on with our outreach model. and trying to really provide some access to folks across our county, and also to our many communities, right? So we have retired the fairgrounds at this time and have switched our Newport clinic to the Samaritan Center for Health Education. And this will be a recurring clinic, I believe, once a month. Otherwise, we are in Lincoln City, in Panner Creek, in Otis. We are keeping the La Juquelita outreach event. Toledo Library is still having us. Yahat is still having us. We have another clinic at, I will not be able to pronounce this camp very well, but this is happening on 6/21. And we also are planning on being at Waldport. The other news that I wanted to pass on is because we've seen this increase of cases and because we've heard that people were having a hard time accessing testing again, we've decided to set up a weekly testing at our Nye Clinic location in Newport. It's free of charge. You can make an appointment. You don't have to make an appointment. There is plenty of information as to how to sign up for those tests on our website. And the clinic is happening from 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. So if you have symptoms or you've been exposed, please don't hesitate to come and get tested. The team really felt like they wanted to step it up and bring kind of a regular testing location for folks. And obviously at all the vaccine clinics locations, we're also offering testing as needed. Next slide, please.
Hey, Florence, I just would like to, so if you go to a vaccine clinic, testing is available at all of those as well?
Yes, correct.
Oh, I hadn't heard that. That is wonderful. I'm not.
Oh, it's been the case for many months.
Okay, great. I'm not sure that all the community knows that. So I will do my part in helping spread the word, but that's great. Thanks.
Yeah, you're welcome. So just to recap, even though we all would like that COVID be over, this is not the case, and COVID is still pretty active in our community. And like I mentioned earlier, this is a very impressive virus in terms of adaptation. So just to remind everybody of symptoms, because definitely, I know in my household, I've been around way more coughing than I would like and runny nose and all that. And we've been doing a lot of COVID testing. So symptoms for COVID: coughing, fever, shortness of breath or difficulty breathing, fatigue, headache, when you lose a sense of taste or smell, sore throat, congestion or runny nose, nausea or vomiting, diarrhea. So really, here are the recommendations. You have any of those symptoms, please stay home. You don't know what it is. And even if it's not COVID, please don't share whatever it is that you have. I think, we've all learned that staying home has reduced all sorts of cruds and cold in the past few years. So stay home if you're sick and wait until your symptoms resolve, or at least if you see an improvement. Because the most likely, especially if it's COVID, for you to be really contagious is in the early stages, because this new virus is so fast now. And so same thing with testing. If you can test, as soon as you are experiencing those symptoms, you're more likely to catch a positive result than if you wait a few days after your onset of symptoms. Obviously, resting and taking care of oneself would be appropriate. Wearing a mask would be also great if you're starting to cough or experience any of those symptoms, so that you do not spread whatever illness that you're going through to others. And like I said, get tested as soon as you can. And even if you get a negative result, especially on those at-home tests, it doesn't mean that it's not that you don't have COVID, because we've seen a lot of those tests coming up negative. So let me take an example. You have a household of 4. Everybody gets tested and only one person pops positive. Does it mean that everybody else doesn't have COVID? Really unlikely. And remember that you can transmit this virus even if you're asymptomatic. So I think what I would recommend is, like, any primary symptoms or initial symptoms, please wear a mask around others and stay home if you can do that. Next slide, please. Any questions?
Thank you for that informative report, and Florence, and I will see now if either of my colleagues have any questions in regard to the presentation.
No questions for me. Thank you, Florence.
You're welcome.
Commissioner Hunt?
Yes, I do have a couple of questions. The availability of home test kits, well, the availability has significantly increased recently, or as we've been in the pandemic longer and longer. Do you have an idea of how the ability to test at home may have impacted the case count and therefore reduced the actual cases in the area or statewide?
Yeah, I think you have a really good point, in the sense that the only positive reports we're getting are from people who went to a clinic or a pharmacy or a lab to get tested, and those entities are required to report those results to us. Now, we've done a lot of work in Lincoln County to offer a platform for people to report their positive tests to us if they tested at home, so that we could try to track to get a better view of the actual situation in our community. Not everybody does that. Maybe not everybody knows about this, but just to remind folks, we have a very quick survey on our website that people can go to and report their results to us, and that would actually help us getting a better sense of what's happening. But yes, absolutely. Commissioner Hunt, it is likely that the picture we're getting today is not necessarily the full picture. And we might have more COVID cases in our community than what we're seeing.
All right, thank you. My next question, final question is, how would you compare this variant to other variants as far as transmissibility and severity?
So what we're hearing is, if you may remember, Omicron variant that we experienced, at least in the US, in December, January mostly, and then February, was a very transmissible variant compared to Delta, that was already a very transmissible variant, but it was like, I don't know, I don't remember exactly how many folds more transmissible Omicron was. And so what we're learning is that the sister variants of Omicron are as transmissible as the first Omicron iteration. And the severity of disease is milder, and Obviously, if you are immunized, vaccinated and possibly boosted, if you get sick with COVID, the severity of disease you are going to experience would be milder than if you had not been vaccinated. But I can tell you that I have some friends who got sick with this latest variant we're experiencing. And I mean, mild, yeah. But I mean, when you're experiencing it, it was like a flu. Like the person was in bed for like a week or so, and even though vaccinated and boosted. So I think we have to be realistic also when we say mild. It's still like pretty disabilitating, but it's not likely to take you to the hospital, if that makes sense.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Florence, thanks again for a great report, and we'll see you next time.
You're so very welcome. Have a good day.
You too. We're up to commissioner reports, and I'd like to report that on Saturday, I represented the board at the dedication of the new suspension bridge at the Amanda Trail near Cape Perpetua. There have been two previous bridges at that site, unfortunately, both washed out by winter floods and slides. This one is far more substantially built. It's basically a metal suspension bridge, and in addition to being functional, it's quite attractive. I was one of the invited speakers for the event, and it was really a very moving experience. I would say there were probably a couple of hundred community members present, and not only celebrating the beauty of that spot, but also remembering the horrors that happened, the evil that happened at that place, the Oregon's own version of the Trail of Tears. Commissioner Hunt, anything? Nope.
No, I would just add to your comment that I think Joanne Kittle has been a big driver behind that effort, and certainly others, but work well done.
Indeed. I mean, you're talking county playing a small role, state agencies, federal agencies, a whole army of View the Future volunteers and Yahats, and I'm sure I'm leaving out some folks. Commissioner Jacobson, do you have anything to report?
I was just going to add to what you had said and say I wasn't able to be there because I was helping my daughter with her first 4-H dog show in over 2 years, which was exciting to see all the kids back together again. But saw the photos from the event. It looked really, like a really nice event. And I also just wanted to mention that Lincoln County Land Legacy Funds were involved in that and creating the conservation easement for the actual bridge to go in. So we did have a small role in helping financially and that bridge actually moving forward through our land legacy program.
Thank you. Anything else to report?
Nothing, thanks.
All right. Now we move to the time scheduled for public comment. We don't have anybody in the room, and we didn't have anything in writing. So one final call for people to use the raise hand function on Zoom if they wish to comment that way. And again, a reminder that your time is limited to 3 minutes per person. And we're not seeing any raised hands, so I will move to adjourn the meeting. But before that, mention that Monday, May 23rd, 2002, 9 a.m., our office staff meeting. Wednesday, June 1st, 10 a.m., our weekly Public Board of Commissioners business meeting. Commissioner Hunt?
Not to correct the board chair, but there is a typo there. Our offices will be closed.
Oh, yes.
On
That's
Monday,
right.
the 30th.
All right.
And our staff meeting will be on Tuesday, the 31st.
That's right.
So again, the correct information that we were given.
Right, so Tuesday, the 31st at 9, Wednesday, the 1st at 10. And both of these meetings are conducted in the hybrid format with people meeting in person in this conference room and also in having access through the Zoom